Y'all know nothing about this. You need to pay attention. Sit back and relax. It's time for Goodall's Country Kitchen.
All right. I know a lot of my regular YouTube channel followers are probably wondering what in the world this video is going to be about today, because I usually just do food reviews and then sometimes add in a little history at the tail end of the videos. But one thing that's important to me is preserving history, whether it be Kentucky history, national history, world history. I'm also big into preserving family history, which brings me to why I'm here today. This is what I refer to as the museum room. These are all family artifacts, and literally every piece that is in this room has a story behind it. I have artifacts going back to my great-great-grandmother's spinning wheel, Mary Eliza Taylor, also her rocking chair, which goes back to at least Mary Eliza Taylor, could possibly go back to the generation before, which was Calvin Prevette Taylor and Darcus Beasley Taylor. I even preserved a lot of my wife's family heirlooms and artifacts. When Melissa's grandmother died a few years ago, I was lucky enough to acquire a few very unique pieces, and I'll go through a couple of those before I get to the point of this video. As I said, this rocking chair goes back possibly to my third great grandparents, but for sure my second great grandparents in Barnett's Lick in Butler County, Kentucky. The cabin that these pieces sat in is actually still standing and in very good condition today. My great-grandfather, Voris Taylor, he was born and lived in that cabin, and my grandmother, Irene Taylor Goodall, who just died, was born in that cabin too. And you see a lot of these old patent medicines and everything that belonged to my wife's great-grandparents. They had a pharmacy down the West End, got flooded out during the 37 flood. Melissa's great-grandmother's hats. But here's the one that goes back the furthest in Melissa's family, is this porcelain doll that came from Germany that was given to Melissa's great-great-grandmother by her aunt. So that goes back to Melissa's third great-grandmother's sister, passed that down to Melissa's second great-grandmother. But everything in here, every piece, the furniture, there's a lot of artifacts in here that have stories behind them. I'm big into history. I'm a student of history, always trying to learn more, but I really believe in preserving my family history. Even 20 years ago, I got so tied up into it that I even wrote a book about my second great-grandfather's regiment during the Civil War. His name was Francis Marion Havens, named after the swamp fox in the Revolutionary War. But you can see him there and some other officers that served in his regiment. Anyway, I published that in 2004, and it was a mission that I was on, that I had to preserve my ancestors' memory. In the summer of 2020, I decided that I was going to take my family on a beach vacation to Hilton Head, South Carolina. It was during the height of COVID. Everything was shut down, but for some reason, Hilton Head was still open for business. So I was studying the maps on which route I was going to take to go down there, and I noticed on the route that I decided on, it was going right by Camden, South Carolina. I thought it'd be a great idea if we stopped there for the night and we could walk the battlefield the next day, retrace my ancestors' footsteps. His name was William Beasley, my fifth great-grandfather, and he fought in the 2nd Regiment of North Carolina Militia that was raised out of New Bern, North Carolina, in Craven County. Also, while I was there, I looked up an old friend, Sean McFall, who I buy palm trees from. Back when I first built the house, I planted on the side of the house. Anyway, we got down there, and I decided while we're there, I was going to do a video. And this was in the early days of my YouTube channel, so I didn't put it on my YouTube food channel. I uploaded it to just a YouTube account separate and put it on there, and never really thought much about it after that. But I just wanted it documented that, you know, the story of my fifth great-grandfather, William Beasley. I recently have been transitioning history into some of my videos that I do on the restaurants. A lot of Kentucky history, Civil War, Revolutionary War period history. So I decided that I would go ahead and dig up that old video that I did 4 years ago and just do a video just on that. Even though it's not about food, well, it kind of is. I'll explain that in a second. But I just wanted to share the story of my 5th great grandfather. A lot of the followers like the family history I talk about. They like the Kentucky history and all history for that fact. So for some of you all that are interested in that, you might want to watch this video. Also, stay for the end of the video because I do a slideshow covering that vacation we took in Hilton Head that summer. And there's some interesting cuisine that I cooked while I was down there. You'll see jambalaya, a low country boil, blackened grouper. So if you want to see some of the stuff I cooked up for my family, watch that. And of course, we got a lot of good beach vacation shots. So sit back, relax for a few minutes, and enjoy. We're outside Camden, South Carolina, at the site of the Battle of Camden, which was one of the battles in the Southern campaign during the War of Independence. Your main units were British Army under Lord Cornwallis and the American Army under Horatio Gates. Let me just back up a little bit. I'm here mainly because my 5th great grandfather, William Beasley, fought here, and he was with the 2nd Regiment of North Carolina Militia, raised out of Craven County, North Carolina, around the town of New Bern, where all my other ancestors were. This was a hard lesson for the Americans to learn because you had an American army which outnumbered the British Army 2-1, but you had mostly militia with some Continental regulars from Maryland and Delaware going up against Cornwallis's 2,000 British regulars. And the Americans thought because they had the numerical superiority that they could go toe-to-toe with the British. Well, this would be the last time in the Southern Theater that that would have ever happened. At the outset of the battle, the first volley that the British fired, you had the entire regiment of Virginia militia threw down their weapons, broke and ran. Most of the North Carolina militia broke and ran, but there was a brigade of North Carolina militia, which of course William Beasley was a part of, that stood and fought alongside the Delaware and Maryland regiments. At the point that the militia broke and ran, Major General Horatio Gates found a speedy horse and took off and actually outrun his fleeing troops. And it was said that he didn't stop his horse until he had gotten 60 miles to Hillsborough, North Carolina. But anyway, left on the field to command the Americans was the brave Frenchman, the Baron Johann de Kalb, who stayed in front of his troops and actually went toe-to-toe for about an hour with the British until they were outflanked by British cavalry. He was forced to retreat, and while still leading his troops, he was shot off his horse and was shot three times and bayoneted 8 times. His aide, Chevalier Dubois, he threw his body in front of de Kalb and actually took some of the bayonet hits. And later, Cornwallis, seeing de Kalb wounded on the field, told de Kalb, he said, "I'm not sorry to see you vanquished, but I am so sorry to see you so badly wounded." And Cornwallis had de Kalb taken into Camden and was cared for by his personal physician until he died 2 days later. If you look over here, you see this monument. This is the exact spot where the Baron de Kalb was mortally wounded. And you can see people have left little mementos and rocks and put it on the top there. You know, as I said, de Kalb was a Frenchman, but as France got involved in the revolution late in the war, de Kalb joined up with George Washington, was at Valley Forge, and then eventually was sent down here into the Southern Theater. Fought bravely, and we're going to go see his grave later, and I'll talk a little bit more about him. But this is pretty much where it turned into a complete rout, and the American troops ran for their lives through the swamps. Out of 4,000 troops, only 1,000 of the Americans managed to escape, and most of those guys were wounded. But anyway, we'll touch more on the Baron de Kalb when we get to his grave. Okay, we're here at a historic Camden where there's a lot of historic buildings and things here, but here you can see a replica of a wall that Cornwallis erected that did a semicircle around the entire city of Camden. And if you look over this way, if Melissa can zoom in over there, you can see a replica built on the original foundation of Lord Cornwallis's headquarters that he used before the Battle of Camden and after the battle until he was forced to evacuate Camden in 1781. But if you look around, pan around, you can see it's a beautiful park here, all kinds of historic buildings, and there is a whole lot to see here. But we're going to end our trip. We're going to go to the monument of the General de Kalb grave. This is the final resting place of General de Kalb. Probably can't read it here, but in the epitaph it says, "Here lies the remains of Baron de Kalb, a German by birth, but in principle a citizen of the world." And on this side it says, "He was second command at the battle fought near Camden on the 16th of August 1780 between the British and Americans, and there nobly fell covered with wounds while gallantly performing deeds of valor and rallying the friends and opposing the enemies of the adopted country." You can see back here in the foreground, the background is the Bethesda Presbyterian Church. That's where he's interred here in downtown Camden. As far as my ancestor that fought here in 1797, William Beasley and two other patriarchs of my ancestors, Daniel Doherty and Moses Taylor, who were also patriots, took all their family, their children, their grandchildren, about 50 people, and came by ox cart from Craven County, North Carolina to the Cumberland River. From the Cumberland River, they took flatboats to the Ohio River and up the Green River to Warren County, and then eventually migrated the next county over into what would become Butler County, Kentucky. William Beasley applied for pensions late in life and also left his wife a widow's pension, and thanks to that I was able to gather enough information to where it brought me here to Camden, and I was able to, walk the steps that he stepped back in 1780. If you're ever on your way to Hilton Head or Myrtle Beach, definitely need to plan a trip to come here.
Now you know the facts of why I'm on a mission. You're always welcome back to Goodall's Country Kitchen.